Do you ever find yourself just losing it and reacting and shooting from the hip? Ever felt like you just can't keep your cool in those challenging situations? Hi, I'm Aaron Gross, and I'd like to show you what it looks like to respond somatically rather than react emotionally. In today's fast-paced world, learning the difference between responding and reacting to stresses can change the whole way we go about navigating those challenging situations. You see, the reason we often lose it and react rather than respond calmly is because we forgot our body. So let's talk body rather than just head, which is what responding somatically is all about. How is the body responding to that threat? The body doesn't have the ability to lie. The body can't pretend how it's feeling. It's just feeling what it's feeling. The mind, on the other hand, can convince us, I'm not feeling this anymore, I'm over it, etc. And the mind can distract us as well. And it'll do anything to get away from some of those feelings and sensations that can feel very uncomfortable. There's a big difference between just changing your thinking versus actually creating an embodied deep shift way down inside. The embodied shift is the real key to transformation. Trying to just let go of something mentally or shifting your perspective in your head doesn't actually transform you. It's like ripples on the pond of water. The surface moves around, but the water itself stays the same. True change happens when the shift occurs at a gut level through your entire being, not just your thoughts. That's when the real metamorphosis takes place, rather than temporary mental gymnastics that we try to do to get our way out of something that's really bugging us. Changing our outer appearance or surface level thinking might make a noticeable difference, like a new reflection in the mirror, but that doesn't necessarily transform who we are at the core of who we are. Cognitive, mental shifts in perspective and positive thinking are great tools at times, but they don't always lead to a deep fundamental change in our very nature and essence. For a true alchemical, almost magical metamorphosis to occur, a profound shift from one state of being to another at the marrow in our bones of our existence, the transformation has to happen at an embodied, visceral level. The real alchemy happens not just in the mind, but through an integration of mind, body, and spirit. Only then can we transmute our essential self into something totally new. You know what it's like to finally let something just go. It feels like your whole body lightens up, like you've been holding on to this grief like a heavy weight. You cry it out. There's a huge release from everywhere, your heart, your gut, your stomach, everywhere. It's so much more than just thinking that you're thinking, well, I'm over it. It's like your whole self gets involved in the letting go. It's not just in your head, it's a total body experience where you've dropped this massive weight that you didn't even realize you were carrying. It's like a cathartic release of energy. Moving into our body is the opposite of dissociation. It means coming back to being fully human, because to be fully human is to fully experience our humanity. Therefore, it involves closing the gap between our consciousness and our body until we've got one unified experience in the moment. The body, so to speak, like the royal road, the royal path, if you will, to a transformation, in the sense that the shift won't actually happen if it's not included in the whole process that we're dealing with here. By the way, if you do like what you're seeing over here, it would mean so much to me if you could click on the like and subscribe button to help this channel grow, to get the word out to more people who can actually help, who are suffering, to end their pain. Because if you can change the life of somebody else, that would mean so much to me. So let's spread the word. Let's help this channel grow to create a better outcome for people in their lives. So now I'd like to give you an example of a cognitive shift versus a somatic shift. During a somatic healing session, I'm always watching the body reactions within the person that I'm working with. What are their facial features? What are their facial responses? What's the tension like in their shoulders? Is their jaw really clenched? That's what we do as somatic coaches and therapists. So this therapist that I know was working with a particular individual, and whenever their father came up, there was a lot of physical tension in their body because the father left the family when she was only 4. And then he came back into her life, and when she was an adult and they had some sort of relationship again, and as soon as the client was asked to explore that dynamic in her life, she said, I'm okay, I've done the work. I wrote him a forgiveness letter about 4 years ago. We do those type of things, but there was still a lot of tension in her body. She may have done those things, but when the therapist actually mentioned her father, you could see that there was a lot of tension still in her body. So then the therapist asked, would it be okay if we could explore this? And if it's all clear, good. All we want to do is check that. So she agreed, and they started investigating and going into that area with her father, and there was a lot in there. And there was a part of her that was wanting to sort of like protect and not look at it. And she had an amazing amount of anger and sadness and grief and all these emotions that were around her dad. She might have cognitively said that she did the forgiveness letter and may have mentally convinced herself that she forgave him. But that resentment towards her dad was controlling her life to the point where she was having this somatic stress that she was storing around him in her body. And it wasn't easy work. They had to go through all the different ways she was angry at him and let her express that anger in the safety of a session with all the things she wanted to say and do. And finally, underneath all that anger was another deep level of sadness and abandonment, and then they had to do a lot of work on that as well. But this is a great example of including the body in the therapy, not just the mind, where you write out a letter in order to fully heal. And in a moment, I'm going to give you some tools that you can use for yourself to better help manage your own emotional challenges and triggers so you can somatically respond rather than emotionally react. Some of these stressful things we experience in our body can unwind in just a couple of hours in and after a session, and some of these stresses could even take weeks and months to release. But at the end of the day, we don't know. So what I do as a therapist, we just keep going in there. We keep on helping the client unwind and release these stresses that are being held in the body, either consciously or unconsciously, because they're directing our lives and the way we interact with the present moment. The amount of stress we experience during the day isn't even necessarily related to the actual stress of the day, but it's having all this unprocessed anger and rage, grief, terror, whatever it is, these unmetabolized life experiences that are being held in our body throughout the whole day. And the level of that energy it unconsciously takes to keep functioning on top of that. And then we finally get to the end of the day. Have you ever been where you're just done and finished and you're just knocked out? What do we do then? Then we need a drink to calm down. We might need to go on our phones to distract ourselves. And we've got no shortage of plentiful options to distract ourselves during the day. And then finally, at the end of the day, we turn everything off and we're ready to go to sleep. But there's so much stress under the hood from the day that people just have trouble switching off and sleeping. And sleep has become a really hot topic today, with sleep being a collective issue for so many people. And a lot of it stems from what we're discussing here. But on the other hand, stress has a good side to it as well, when we've got a good capacity within ourselves to interact with the present moment, when we're fairly well resourced as the nervous system within the body feels safe. So then, from that vantage point, when we're well resourced, when we encounter stress, we can always keep up with it as human beings. We can deal with it. We can work through it. We can be there for it. We can be present for ourselves through whatever gets thrown at us. And we come out on the other side essentially a greater human being because the stress helps us grow. Because stress is like a double-edged sword of support on one side and a challenge that's crushing on the other. So as long as we're well supported within ourselves and well resourced, when we encounter a challenging, stressful situation, we can grow. But unfortunately for most of us mere mortals, myself included, we're just not always in that space. And we've got this built-up stress from the past that just builds and builds and builds over years and decades, where that accumulated stress can turn into chronic stress. And this is very important to know, so you'll be able to manage your own stress. So to better understand this idea of carrying stress with us, let me give you a metaphor of a backpack. This backpack that you carry on your back, so to speak. Every time we go through a stressful event and we don't have a safe space to go to in order to be able to process it, then it's like we're throwing a rock or a pebble each time into that backpack. And as we go through life, throwing more and more stones and more rocks into that backpack, it's getting heavier and heavier, and we're just schlepping it around everywhere. And it might be in the future, we might have the courage to see someone like a professional or a friend who could hold a space for us to release some of those rocks and pebbles, but there are always more rocks coming in than going out. And over time, that stress accumulation, that stress load becomes so high and unbearable that we just start to crack or even show physical symptoms. And the intelligent body does this to give us a warning signal. It could be a mental health disorder or a physical symptoms and addictions. Then we try to grab something outside of ourselves to help soothe that stress that's happening on the inside. But all is what the stress is trying to do is give us a wake-up call when the stress gets to a chronic point. Let's look at the jellyfish metaphor of the right way to react to life and stress. The jellyfish kind of pulses between stress and relax, stress and relax. And our nervous system works in the same way. If we're really attuned enough and our awareness becomes refined enough, we can actually feel the pulse of our own nervous system. That stress and relax is kind of like a heartbeat. And the heart is another way to describe this contraction and expansion, relaxation, if you will. That's the way the nervous system self-regulates. The problem we have as a collective is that we experience that stress and we get stuck in it, and then that stress gets stored in the body. And then that becomes accumulated stress over time. Ideally, our nervous system should self-regulate between that contraction and expansion. And our capacity for self-regulation is deeply influenced by our childhood experiences and the quality of our relationship with our primary caregiver, often our mother. Early in life, our nervous system learns patterns of regulation through interactions with our caregiver, who serves as a model for our own self-regulation. But unfortunately, many of us never fully develop this ability, leading to a reliance on unhealthy coping mechanisms and the accumulation of stress over time. So learning to self-regulate is absolutely pivotal in managing the stresses we encounter throughout life. By honing this skill, we can shift from reactive responses to thoughtful, intentional actions. And I'm about to give you a somatic practice that you can do anytime once you've set it up with me over here, so you can navigate through life's challenges with greater ease. Over time, we get all this stored stress, and then that stored stress turns into chronic stress. We've all had this stress: wounds, pain, childhood imprints stored in our nervous system and in our body. And then the body loses the capacity to harmonize and have more of a jellyfish pulse-like relationship to the world of healthy expansion and contraction. You could imagine the jellyfish going into stress, contraction, and then it doesn't re-expand again like it did before. And by the end of it, we're like a little intense ball that just can't contract and expand at all. It's almost like being permanently constipated, if you will. So while we're talking about feeling things on a visceral experience level, I want to now help you learn how to respond rather than react and shoot from the hip. In order to do this, we need to create what we call a safe space for you to go to whenever you're feeling strong, intense, uncomfortable feelings about anything. Then when that happens, you'll go into that safe space till you calm down again. Doing this is going to give you a better equilibrium to respond to difficult situations rather than just shoot from the hip. I spend a lot of time with my clients in this safe space, but for today's video, I'm just going to streamline it. We're about to create what I call a resource or safe space. But before we do that, we need to create what I call a mind book to remember that safe space, which is called an anchor spot. And that anchor spot could be grabbing on the wrist, it could be touching your thigh, putting both hands on your heart, putting your hands at the back of your neck. It doesn't really matter what it is. It could be hugging yourself or anything that makes you feel safe. Just touching anywhere on your body as a safe way of anchoring this safe space. So next time you get triggered, you can touch that anchor spot on your body and come back to that safe space till you calm down again. So decide what it's going to be. You can stop the video if you need to. Now I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and just think of a time that you felt really good and supported and safe. If you can't think of a particular moment, like the beach or a forest or something else, you might want to think of a person. Doesn't even have to be a real person. It could be a mythical character from a movie or whatever makes you feel safe. It could also be an object that you might feel safe holding onto. It could be a certain place or object in the room that you feel safe looking at. You could bring that to mind right now and just sit with that safe space for a moment. Notice how it makes you feel in your body. For me, it was gentle and very soft, and I could feel my breathing slowing down and my whole body slowing down while doing this. And for me, I could even feel my heartbeat. So while you're enjoying that, I now would like to invite you to anchor this safe space in to your body. It could be grabbing the wrist. It could be touching your thigh, putting your hands on the back of your neck or head, or putting your hands on your heart. Whatever it is, whatever you chose as your anchor spot is fine. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you've created some sort of anchor spot to re-trigger yourself to tune into this safe space when you need to. Just touching anywhere on your body should be a way of anchoring this safe space. So next time you get triggered, you just put your hands on that place, on your body, to come back to that safe space till you calm down again. And just sit there with that anchor as you're anchoring for a few seconds and enjoy that safe space as you touch your anchor. When you enter a stressful situation, touch that anchor spot to come into your safe space so you can respond rather than react. Now I'm going to ask you to open your eyes and come back to me. You can also use this touching of this safe space. If you can't actually touch it because it's awkward, you could picture yourself touching yourself on your anchor spot, whatever you created, without even actually touching it. And that'll bring you to some sort of equilibrium as well. If you're in public, you can't actually necessarily, it'll be awkward going like this or hugging yourself in front of everybody. This is going to help you when you get triggered to touch that anchor spot to come back to your safe space. And that way it'll give you more equilibrium to go out into the world afterwards to face that difficult situation rather than shoot from the hip. Although I do spend a lot more time on this with my clients, I hope this at least gives you a primer or a starter to start building up your own resource and building your capacity to have a more calmer demeanor to life's challenging situations. And if you practice this more often, it's just going to get, it's like a muscle. It's going to get stronger and stronger. But if you want to learn more about somatic healing and coaching, I've got a video earlier on that you can look at which explains what somatic healing is about. And if you want to take it to the next level, where you finally get rid of some of those nasty triggers, which we can all fall into at times, then contact me to set up a time for a free intro session to further help you in your healing journey towards living a meaningful and happy life beyond the pain and past that most people have experienced somewhere in this journey called life.